The reason I had you do this assignment without any instruction, and the reason I had you do a discussion post on it, is I wanted you to see what your tendencies were in terms of how to do this image. So when I see students do this image, I see a lot of this. They go ahead and they make a set of, I'm going to just draw on top of the photo here. They basically like sketch out the side first. And then from that point, maybe at most, students will also do this. And if this isn't what you did, then congratulations, that's great. People approach this different ways, but I want you to think about your approach. Then from that point, they just start trying to draw these things. And when people are drawing those things without the photo there, they just start going, and the proportions aren't very constrained, and they wind up like not having enough space. You get things where people are drawing too big. Some people even just start in the middle and start trying to just draw every little detail. And one of the things that I'm sure is coming up very frequently in these discussion posts is that it's just hard to get all the details in the right place at the right size. So you're dealing with the difficulties of flat screen proportion stuff. What most people fail to see, even though we pretty much just did a discussion about composition and underlying compositional forces, is that this thing exists entirely on a grid. So there's an underlying compositional structure here where it's split into quarters, and then this interior part split into quarters. Here you pretty much section off the top and the bottom, and then the top and the bottom are split into quarters. So you see that they line up. So that's one thing that I can check when I'm doing my drawing. If I have this piece here, and then this piece is over here, and I check how they line up, I know something's gone awry. So what I'm doing is I'm creating it's called an armature, or a structure. We'll call it structure drawing. Creating a structure, a set of grids that this whole thing can fit into. Then within, take those away. Within this area, actually, let's leave one of them. Within this area here, these are also split perfectly in half. And then they're split into like half again. Right, capturing the middle of these and the tops and bottoms of those. Now, another structural thing I can check is this line should be slightly to the right of this line, and this one should be slightly to the left. If in my drawing I have the two things lined up, I know I've gone wrong and I need to correct it. Okay, and I could keep breaking this up. I could subdivide these areas further. See how that lines up with these. All right, and I could just keep finding the grid. Maybe it's better. There we go. We'll split it into thirds. Yeah, the middle of that's on a third. So the middle of the dot. I could keep subdividing this however much I wanted. But, get as far as you need to go to be able to put things in. Then once you've got that grid in place, then it's easier to come in and say, okay, well, this is going to be on the middle of that. This is going to come to here. And you can work like that. I put these in. I know it's going to go here. It's going to stop there. Right? So it's easier to find all the placement of these things. So you're creating boxes within which everything exists. And then those boxes make sure that your proportions and your sizes of things stay in order. This is flat screen stuff. Right shape in the right place and the right size in relationship to the other shapes, and you'll do good. We just need to learn to see those underlying compositional structures. Now this structure is pretty simple. It's a grid. It's a series of like pretty symmetrical, cutting things in half, cutting things in quarters. An image like this doesn't have that easy grid in it. If I go ahead and put a grid, let me snap some lines here real quick. Okay, those are the middle points. If I split this image into half like that, and start putting a grid on it, it's not super helpful. Like, the best information it gives me is it gives me the fact that his trapezius and his deltoid come together at a point right here. It also shows me that his ear is pretty much in the middle. It's not quite in the middle, but where his ear, top of his ear touches his head is a little bit off center. It gives me this point here where the tattoo changes, and pretty much right where his short changes. So this center line's not bad. Middle of the bicep, middle of the deltoid over there. That's a pretty useful line. Going this way, it's like in the middle of his head, right where the E touches the arm. So there's some right where his elbow's at. So putting a grid on it isn't bad. I'll go ahead and draw a line across there. Well, actually, no. What we're going to do is we'll back out. So what might be more useful is to look at what's actually in the image. There's some lines in the image that are super helpful. So the line of the edge of the octagon here, the edge of the cage, is a straight line like this. It's not quite in the middle, close to the middle, but it's tilted at an angle. Make that a little bit thicker for you. Okay, it's tilted at an angle to everything else. There we go. Let's see that better. There's also this line right here, and I'll draw that line straight. Now that line is awesome, and the way those two lines come together is really great. Those two lines just happen to come together right where his back is at. This line here also shows you exactly where his glove stops. It shows you exactly where the pants dip at the lowest level. It shows you not quite the middle of his shoulder. And then on this line, again, you have it meeting at the back. It has the knuckle on the tattoo right there. This point of the shoulder is a little bit below it. It gets exactly right where his ear meets his head. Comes pretty close to a stupid flat top. Right in the middle of the deltoid, or sorry, the bicep. Pretty much the bottom of the pec is a little bit below it. And then the middle of the deltoid over here. So you see that with these two lines, I have a whole bunch, the wrists of the tattoo, I have a whole bunch of extremely useful placement information. I'm taking a complex image like this and breaking it down into some simple shapes. If I take the image away, that's just a set of shapes that you should all easily be able to see. Right? Like if I gave you this and I said draw a triangle about this size and a triangle about this size on the piece of paper, you'd be able to do that. So that's what we'll be doing with this structure drawing assignment, is we're just doing everything with straight lines, and we're breaking the image up into a series of structural relationships. We're not drawing the stuff. What we're drawing are the measurements of the things as they break up the picture plane. This doesn't work without a picture plane. You need a picture plane for this to work. So I'll keep going on this image now. Another really useful thing to see is, like with the Simpsons, where does this divide the image into his side and his side? So there's a line that I can make. I can assess, in the drawing, okay, there's a line and it's tilted like that. I can figure that out. It's like, that far over and tilted at that angle. Easy to figure out. So I'll put that in there. Then on that line, you'll get right where his forearm meets his shoulder. You get his whole goofy flat top. You'll get right where his glove and his wrist meet. You'll get pretty much where his finger pops out of his glove, and you'll get where his shorts are at. So not only have you simply divided it into his side versus his side, but you've got another, 4 or 5 points there. Any line that has 3 or more points on it like that is a really good line. You can also carve out a box that this guy fits into. So you just chop off a triangle on that side. Chop off a triangle here. Notice I'm extending the lines all the way across the whole composition. Like right from that same point there, captures his elbow and the top of his head. Let's go from his knee to his glove. That's a pretty good line. Yeah, that's good there. And I just start creating these smaller boxes. You want these lines to go all the way across because you'll never know what they might line up to. So I'm going to go down the center of his face now, and I'll see that that pretty much also tells me where his shorts are, tells me where his thumb is at, tells me where the middle of his chest is, the whole middle of his face. Here's a good line here. Just the top of his head is flat all the way across. Get rid of this line here. So you'll see on that line, you have the top of his head also captures the top of his sword. Where it meets with this line is the end of this dude's face. It gets the whole top of his head, goes right through the middle of his shoulder, comes the middle of that guy's nose. His whole eye lines up on it, and it's the middle of his ear. Okay, so that's a really great line there. That's what you're looking for, these obvious lines. Like, what's that? Oops. What's the angle of the arm here? Does that line up to anything else? Yep, right there to where his leg's at. Also gives you where his hand's coming out of his glove. Matches with this line to meet the wrist. Matches right with the middle of that bicep. Okay, so that's what this structure drawing is all about. Finding these lines throughout an image. Another thing you could do is just measure height. So I'll go ahead and open. Well, actually, let me really quick. I'm going to turn on the white. When you turn these drawings in, this is what they should look like. It should be a series of lines, and you can make little lines along them to show a measurement about how long on the line something would be. If we've got, let me go ahead and open up. I'll help you cheat here. Like these images that I'm having you draw from. You can also just measure out like height of things. Go real quick. This is getting kind of long. So I go ahead and just measure within the picture plane. I've got a pretty obvious triangle from the middle of this thing, so I'd measure like that, and then the middle of the guitar, and I want to get the middles. Then the height of the guitar, I could just extend like all the way across, and I'll measure the height, and then I'll see, does anything else line up to that height? Yep, exactly right where these two lines come together is the height of the crutch. And then I could say, where is, like, how far up in the picture plane is the bend in the guitar? This is where the strings plug in. And I can start doing stuff like that. And then I'll see the bend in the guitar also lines up with this bend on the cello. I'll take the angle of the middle of the cello. See if that lines up to anything else. Yep, that lines up right to the corner of that thing there. So those are extremely useful lines within the composition. If my drawing doesn't have that relationship, like if I have drawn this thing and that point is like up over here when I'm drawing that, then I know I need to move my drawing down and shift that to that point. So for these first assignments, this is what I expect. Now, something you might want to do as you're doing these height lines is draw, if you want the objects to show up, because in the end, all you get is the lines. You don't get to sketch the objects in. So it goes from here to here on the height, and then maybe you'll do a dashed line out. That way the objects start to show up. Here's where the guitar's at, and then there's a dashed line showing where that line would extend through space. And as you do that, the objects will start to show up within the solid lines and the dashed lines. Here's where that cuts across the middle of the guitar, or maybe I could even say it just goes from here to here, and then I'll put a dashed line. Now you shouldn't be tracing over the photo. I'm tracing over the photo just to make this easier for you to see. But this is the idea. Don't draw the candlestick, draw the middle of the candlestick. Extend the line, draw the top of the candlestick, draw the line. There's the next subdivision. There's the next subdivision. And that's what it should look. Pretty much something like that, but more filled out for each image. So you'll be doing 2 of those. This is structure drawing.